This happened around the summer of 2017. I felt like I'd been having very little luck on dating apps until I came across a guy named Nathan. We matched, and he immediately messaged me. The fact that he matched so fast and sent that message was a bit abrupt, and I, at first, thought, hopefully this isn't a desperate call. But I decided to give the guy a chance. I messaged back and we started a slow conversation, but everything was going pretty normal. He asked me about myself, and I did the same. He seemed like a nice, down-to-earth guy. He told me that he worked a lot, and explained how he was a tow truck driver that worked all kinds of hours as he was typically on call. It made a lot of sense, because our conversations would just abruptly end, and he would respond hours later. I mean, I could appreciate the fact that he refused to have his phone out while he operated a large truck. After talking for a few weeks through text, and on the phone, and not really getting any weird vibes from him, I was really interested in a date. However, I'm dumb and shy, and would never ask, so I just waited for him to do it instead. And I guess that he did, in a way. I had been out late one night with a friend who was actually going through a pretty bad divorce, so we had drinks and just talked. I regrettably got home around midnight, kicking myself because I had to work the next day. As I slid into bed, I got a text from Nathan. It just said, "Hey." And when I responded, he apologized if he'd woken me up, and I told him that he hadn't, and that I was already awake. He then texted me again, asking if I wanted to go party with him. I clarified if he meant that night, at that moment, and he did. And I guess maybe in my slight stupor, I just laughed it off and told him that I couldn't, because I had to work tomorrow. He joked around, sort of teasing for a bit, but he didn't push it. He then wished me a good night, and I went to sleep. The next day, he messaged me again around noon, and apologized for the messages the night before, but it didn't really bother me. Hell, I thought maybe he'd had a little liquid courage like me, and thought that was the best way to go about it. Overall, we did make real plans for an actual date that same weekend, and I was pretty excited. We agreed on a nice local restaurant that we were both familiar with. It wasn't too fancy, which was nice, because then I didn't feel like I had to overdress or anything. I arrived there first, so I got us a booth, ordered a soda, and waited for him to arrive. However, it had been 10 minutes past our meeting time, and I hadn't even gotten a message saying he was running late. I reminded myself that he does do an on-call job, and thought maybe he had one last minute, or one that was taking longer than expected. But once it hit 20 minutes, I thought I would at least message him as a sort of check-in. No response to the text. After waiting a few more minutes, I tried calling. No answer. So when it hit 30 minutes, I texted him saying that we could reschedule, but I was going to leave. I was really disappointed, but I also really liked him, and as dumb as it may sound, I didn't want to just give up that easily because of it. While I was waiting for the server to bring me my check for my one drink and croissants, he called me. He was apologizing profusely for being late, and said that he didn't realize it was as late as it was. I honestly didn't realize this until days later, but he never mentioned why he was late otherwise. He didn't even mention that he was working, or if something else came up. He said that he was almost at the restaurant if I was still interested, so I agreed to stay. When he showed up, though, I knew something was off. He didn't quite seem or act the same way he did when we talked on the phone. He was very kind through and through, but as most people do, the first thing I noticed was his appearance. His hair looked like it hadn't been washed and was kind of just sticking up everywhere. He was also wearing dirty jeans and a long-sleeve shirt that had holes seemingly cut out for his thumbs. The holes were uneven and distressed, which, to me, looked like someone put them there. Not that it was bought that way. I used to do that a lot to my hoodies when I was in high school, and that's what it reminded me of. It was also strange to see him in a long-sleeve shirt because it was summer in Arizona. I was getting overheated just looking at him. I knew it wasn't a formal place that we went to, but I honestly didn't expect to see him like this. I also told myself again, maybe he was working, and that's not exactly a clean job, so I let it go. That's surface deep stuff anyways that I wasn't concerned about. But then we got to talking, and I realized that his demeanor and attention was all over the place. We would start talking, and then he would go on a tangent about something completely off topic. He also seemed to get easily irritated at minuscule things, like how the butter wasn't spreading well enough on his baked potato. It was odd. I was really starting to feel a bit disappointed on our first date, but I tried to stay optimistic that maybe it was just a bad day. When we did actually start to eat, I noticed that he just pushed his around a bit and only took a few bites. Then he leaned in and quietly asked if I wanted to go somewhere after this and party with him. Apparently, he must have thought the date was going pretty well to ask this, but the uneasy feeling wasn't going away, so I declined. I told him that I had some things to do the next day or something to that effect, and that maybe we could try another day. He looked disappointed in this as well, but I tried to continue with our current date. Shortly after, he seemed like he had a look of realization and said that he needed to use the restroom, excusing himself. I just finished eating and just sat there waiting for him to return, and once again I was starting to feel like I did when I first arrived. 5 minutes passed, 10 minutes, and he was still not back. Now, I really did feel like a fool. I thought that he must have not really been into me, or maybe I ruined his plans by declining his party offer, so he ditched me. I called the server over and shamefully asked for the check. At this point, I was probably waiting for about 20 minutes since he'd left. I was waiting for our server to return with my card when another male server approached me, and with a bit more sense of urgency, asked me about the guy that I was with. I thought maybe they had come to comfort me, or maybe get a good story to laugh about later, but either way, I started explaining who he was. The guy interrupted me to say that he was in the restroom, on the floor, with foam coming out of his mouth. They also found a syringe on him. Their restroom had 2 stalls in them, and apparently someone else was in there, heard a thud as the door slammed open, and he fell headfirst onto the floor. I was in shock. I didn't know what to do or say. I didn't know him like that, and I sure as hell didn't know he was using anything. Before I could speak, I got up and followed them to the restroom. The server said they had already called for an ambulance, and I just stood there, terrified. I didn't really know what to do at first. This guy that I had just been talking to was most likely ODing on the restroom floor of a restaurant. After hearing someone scream for a towel or something, it finally kicked me into gear and I knelt beside him to turn him over on his side to prevent him from choking. They then asked me to stay with him until help arrived. I barely knew him, and now I might be the last person that he sees. Paramedics quickly arrived and kept asking me all these questions about who he was, and I couldn't answer them. Hell, all I could really tell them was his first name, if that was even true. Once they left with him, I quickly went home and called my friend to help calm my nerves a bit. After we talked, I decided to go to the hospital to see how he was doing, feeling like it was the least I could do. I didn't even know if he had any family or friends that would have or should have known what happened. To sum up the visit, it was not a pleasant one. He was very angry with me. He also made it clear that he was only looking for someone to more or less get high with, and or supply him. And that's what he meant when he called me that night. And that's also what he was expecting when we went on our date. Apparently, when he saw I was a pharmacy tech, he thought that meant I could supply him. And when I turned him down, I didn't take away his need for a fix, so he helped himself in the restroom. Now, I may have been a bit smitten with him at first, but I wasn't stupid. There were no hints dropped of any sort that he was going for this, nor did I lead anything on to make him think that I was into any of that. So, yeah, he basically told me that it was my fault he ended up there, since I didn't go with him. I left the hospital, blocked him in the app, and his number, and I never heard from him again. It was definitely a weird situation that I ended up in, but I guess I'll just remove my job and be more vague about what I do in the future. Hello. I'm not sure how else to start this, other than getting right into the details. I want to include all of the important information, so I apologize if this is a bit longer. I feel like this is an important story to share in order to hopefully help others avoid being in a similar situation. Or even help someone catch the signs early on before too much damage is done. To start, I'm a male in my late 30s. I've dated off and on for quite some time, but never really anything serious. And I mean like dating for a few months at the most. I was beginning to think that I just wasn't cut out for relationships, and was pretty much ready to live with the reality that I probably wouldn't find someone for me. My dating was all through the normal channels. They were a friend of a friend, blind dates, dating profiles and apps. I was willing to try whatever. I never really had much luck on the sites, but I still kept my profile updated in hopes that I could be proven wrong. That's where the story starts. I was going through potential matches, clicking a simple yes, no, maybe, and after going through a few pages, I turned off my laptop and headed for bed. The next morning, I got a match notification and a message from a girl named Yvonne. I remembered choosing yes to her. I remembered her unique name and her long dark hair in her photos. It's always exciting when they actually match back, so it was a good start to my day. We conversed briefly about each other, how we ended up on the site, simple things like that. Later that evening, because I had told her I was off to work, she messaged me again asking how work was. This was the first time that I'd had someone ask me about work. I thought that it was really sweet of her, and the fact that she initiated the conversation twice now was giving me a good feeling about her. We started talking frequently, and she seemed very interested in me. She asked a lot of questions like she truly cared. She was more than willing to share about her life, too. She actually told me that she had moved to the US with her parents when she was very young, and now she helps to take care of them. It wasn't long after that she was willing to meet up and go on an actual date, too. It was actually a few days in when she asked about an actual date. We set one up at a nearby restaurant, and it went incredibly well. She was the same person from the photos, and her personality even fit with the conversation we'd been having too. She was very bubbly and social, and she even seemed very interested in me when I was talking, which I was not used to. We said our goodbyes after dinner, and shortly after leaving, she texted me saying that she was excited about the next date and to make this official. I was honestly in shock. I had no idea what I had done to win a girl like Yvonne, and why she seemed so interested in me and so quickly. But I guess I may have also been clouded by the ideas of just not being alone, not being a third wheel, and to have actually found a real chance at love. We officially started dating the next time that we met up. We went for dinner and a movie, and she actually came back to my place that night. Things were going pretty well for about a month. I had even told a few friends and my older sister about her. My sister wanted to meet her, but Yvonne said that she didn't know if she was ready to meet family yet, and I understood. We hadn't been dating that long, so I definitely was not going to push it. Around our second month in, I had a business trip that I was going to be taking, and I told her all about it, telling her that we wouldn't be able to see each other for about a week. But she insisted that she go with me. That way we could spend more time together. At the time, I thought it was a great idea. She could see a new state, and I would have someone waiting for me back in the hotel. We got the flight all set up to match with my own, and I offered to pay for the flight because her card had been declined. She said that she would pay me back though, and well, that was that. On the trip, she said that she was going to explore the area while I was out, and that she would be back by the time I returned. When I did return, she seemed a bit upset, saying that she was still having troubles with her card, and when she called her bank, they said it was on hold and wouldn't be fixed for a few days. Conveniently when we returned from the trip. I felt bad, and I didn't want her to be cooped up in the room the whole time, so I gave her my debit card and said she could use it to buy herself food, do a little shopping if she wanted, and just be able to have a good time. She thanked me and said that she would transfer money to me when her accounts were back open. The trip was fine from there. She spent a little more than I would have expected, around $300 or so, but she also bought stuff for both of us, which I thought was kind of her to consider. Then, when we went back home, more issues started popping up. She ended up asking for financial help for a lot of things. She asked for help on her car that needed repairs. Then she would come back with something she bought, and when I asked about the car, she said she was able to get it fixed cheaper and had money to spare. If you haven't figured it out yet, I was pretty infatuated with Yvonne. So all I thought was, geez, she's smart with money too. She was able to pay less, giving her some extra money to spend. I also helped her with paying some bills and even helped her parents who were in a financial bind as well. Unfortunately, other people were seeing the red flags way before I did. And this was about 6 months into our dating. She briefly met my sister when she came over to my apartment, but my sister was not keen on her. My sister and I were really close, so she was not afraid to tell me how she felt. She told me how she didn't like how much money I was giving her, and that I needed to set boundaries. I basically told her that she was crazy, and that I had everything under control. This caused some strain between my sister and I, but at the time, I was clouded by what I thought was love. The money thing continued more, to the point that I was now using the funds that I had put in savings. I was having to make sure that I got all my bills and expenses paid first, so I knew how much extra money I had. I knew I was giving her a lot of money, but it just seemed like I was losing a lot more and a lot faster. So I told Yvonne that I had to cut back a bit because of things coming up, and she understood. In fact, she started apologizing and crying, saying that she felt bad and blamed herself. I calmed her down, and I told her that I had been willingly giving her the money, so it was my fault for not monitoring it, and she started perking back up. Around this time, she told me that she had to make an emergency trip back to her home country due to a family issue. So I gave her some cash as padding and wished her well, expecting to see her about 2 weeks later. She still texted me daily through an app, but she said she couldn't call because of signal issues. This is where it finally started clearing up for me. The first thing was when I got a low balance alert from my bank. I was confused because I had just gotten paid the day before. There was no way that I was low. Yet, when I checked my account, I was actually negative. I started checking all the transactions, and it was all for things that I had never heard of. There were charges for high-end clothing stores, online makeup stores, Cash App transfers to a name that I didn't even recognize. I reported it all to my bank, hoping to recoup some of it. I was now a bit stressed because I didn't have any money in my account. I was about to ask my sister to borrow some money for the week, at least until I got some of the money back, but I decided instead that I would just use the money I had saved in a different savings account. When my grandfather passed away, he left all of us grandkids a savings account with some money in them, but I hadn't touched it. I was hoping to keep adding to it and put it towards my own home. I was crushed when I checked it and saw that it was almost drained too. However, that one had transfers to an external account, and to my regular account that I wasn't aware of. This caused me to go back to my account and start digging deeper. This had been going on for a while. The transfers started a few weeks after my business trip. Money was being spent, and then money was being transferred from that savings to make it look like the balance never changed. So I called my bank back to add them to the list, and they brought up that a lot of the charges I was talking about were also used with my card. I didn't even know how that was possible, because I had my card on me, and I know I didn't go to the places that they were mentioning. Then, they explained that someone had called in and asked to have a duplicate card sent. None of this was making any sense. Now my account was being closed due to a huge risk, and my money was going to be held up even longer. So now I had to call my sister and tell her what happened. When I explained this to her, she immediately asked where Yvonne was. I told her that she had to leave the country for a while, and she just laid it out on me. I know that those of you reading or hearing this probably have figured it out by now, but I really thought I had found someone, and I did not want to believe this. So, my sister came over, and together, I was able to start making sense of everything. We did a public records check, and there was no one matching a Yvonne with her description. We went to check her dating profile, and found her on other sites but with varying last names. Then, we were able to find an Instagram with the same pictures, and I was devastated. She had pictures on there with another guy that she was calling her husband. Even worse, there was a picture posted just 2 days prior of her and him in what looked like a theater that was very clearly in the US. I was at a loss for words. She was somewhere else with her so-called husband, enjoying herself on my dime. I was catfished, scammed, swindled, whatever you want to call it, and I felt like such an idiot. But you don't have to tell me that. She hid it incredibly well. She was around often, other than when we both worked, but I guess that she was just using my money, so she was probably with him. We were even intimate, which I guess added to me actually believing that she cared and loved me. Through my embarrassment, my sister helped me with filing a police report. Thankfully, while I did let her use my card at times, she did not have permission to copy the information and use it as she had pleased. She was also not on my grandfather's account, so I was able to report all of those. I was still out a lot of money. Because of the card present charges, it really made it hard to prove what I did or didn't do, and what I had allowed her to use. I was also paying for her phone bill because she got a new phone while we were together, one of her many expenses that I thought that she had, so I quickly turned that off. I guess that she noticed that one because I started getting calls from an unknown number, and it was Yvonne, asking what was wrong with her phone. I confronted her about everything. She first started denying it all, said that I was crazy and that it wasn't her. She even said that she would marry me to prove it. Then she turned to making fun of me, calling me a fool and so on. I obviously pressed charges, and that was the first time that I heard her real name. Sometimes I still get random calls, texts, emails, and Facebook messages from different accounts trying to harass me, and I know that it's just her or her husband. So I block them and move on. So there it is. While it may not have been scary to some, I lost a lot of money, putting me in a bad situation which was pretty scary to me. And who knows how far she would have taken it if I hadn't caught on. Or yet my sister. I'm very thankful that even though I didn't believe her, she stuck by my side to help me out. As mentioned, I wanted to share this as a warning to others. No matter who you are, do not get tangled up in something like this. Learn the warning signs early on, and know that you are worth the time it takes. I got into online dating due to being introverted. I don't like going out to bars or other highly social places, and prefer spending time with a few people only. I made a profile, uploaded some pictures, left some information about myself, and started chatting with people. I wouldn't say that I found anyone I clicked with. Some of them were okay. There were obvious scammer accounts where they would have models as their profile pictures. When Henry, not his real name, contacted me, his pictures were of a handsome man. But they weren't too handsome. They were still realistic and not too polished, so I didn't think that they were fakes. We started chatting and had a lot of similar interests. In fact, I've never met anyone as into the things that I'm into. I didn't realize at the time that he was just mimicking me and wasn't actually interested in what I was talking about. The conversation got flirty, and I admit that I indulged in it. I started talking to him every day. It was part of my routine, and I really enjoyed it. We talked on the phone, and he sounded exactly like what I imagined him to. We would talk for hours, and after another week, we decided to meet. He said that he hoped that I would like him in the flesh, and I laughed, telling him how silly he was being and not to worry. I got to the restaurant first and sat down at the table. He texted me to warn me that there was traffic and that he would be a little late. I didn't mind. I sat and people-watched when an old man approached the table. He stood with his arms wide for a hug, and I awkwardly said, "Hello?" He said, "Aren't you happy to see me?" I stared up at him in confusion when I realized what had happened. He catfished me. I sat there with my eyes open, like a fish, trying desperately to come up with something to say, and I couldn't hide the look on my face. I don't know why, but I stood up, awkwardly hugged him, and he pulled me into a tight hug. At this point, I kind of felt bad for him and thought that he must have been a lonely old man who just wanted some company. He didn't let go until I gently pushed him away. You don't quite look like your pictures, I said, after blubbering for a bit. "Oh, those are my grandson's pictures. He is good looking, isn't he?" He didn't seem fazed by this and sat back down. I looked around and wanted someone to help me. Henry started talking about how happy he was that we got to meet, and it was oddly wholesome at first. Until he said how excited he was to be taking me back to his place to have sex with me. While he was looking over the menu, he started talking about all the things that he wanted to do to me, and that he was excited to now have a mistress. So, that was also how I found out that he was married as well. I didn't care about letting him down gently, and clearly he wasn't just an innocent, lonely old man. I stood up, told him that I wasn't interested in someone like him, and to not contact me again. I picked up my bag and started walking away. He reached over and grabbed my arm, really hard. It actually hurt, and I had dark bruises on my arm afterwards. He told me that he'd come all this way to see me, and called me quite a few horrible names. He was telling me that I was such a tease and that I had led him on. I pushed him away again and screamed for him to leave me alone. A waiter approached and asked what the problem was. I told him, and fortunately it gave me enough time to get away and get to my car. I drove off as fast as I could within the speed limit. I got home and saw that he had sent me so many messages. Some were him begging me to come back, others were calling me a variety of slurs, others saying how horrible I was. I blocked him. After that, I would get messages from other accounts, and the writing would be similar. One managed to slip through, and I recognized him. I yelled at him to leave me alone and reported the account. After all this, I've now learned to video chat with every prospective date before I go to see them. All of this is to avoid any other issues. And so far, it's gone pretty good. I have found someone, and things are going well, so I didn't need the apps anymore. So, I deleted them. The creepy old guy is a story that does get quite a few giggles when I tell it, but it was quite exhausting at the time. Once upon a time, in the digital world, I met a girl online. We'll call her Bella. Bella was a breath of the freshest air that I have ever inhaled. Before meeting Bella, I was depressed as I had just come out of the worst relationship I had ever had or known. I was ready to move forward though, and I thought that I would give online dating a bit of a try, something I now know was a terrible idea. Bella, though, seemed like she was going to be my turning point. Her profile picture was absolutely gorgeous. She had these adorable bright blue eyes, this really curly red hair, and this smile that just screamed absolute sweetheart. I swiped right, wanting to see what happened, but honestly I thought that she would take one look at me and think, no thanks. To my surprise, we matched. Even more to my surprise, we hit it off instantly. We talked about everything, and every conversation was crazy comfortable. Like we had known each other for a long time. I would start messaging and she would be able to relate to everything I said. I told her my favorite books. She would talk about her favorite parts of those exact books. We talked about movies, and we had identical taste. I remember one of the first nights, we actually stayed up until 3 a.m., talking about our love for older rock bands. She started talking about Pink Floyd, and the two of us got into an incredibly pretentious conversation about the musical genius of The Wall and Dark Side of the Moon. These conversations honestly had me feel like the two of us were naturally in sync, like we had found each other through some act of fate, and our future was calling. I know, crazy thoughts to have about someone that you met only a week prior, but something soulmates. When I suggested that we meet in person, Bella was incredibly hesitant. She said that she wasn't comfortable with meeting so soon, and that she was nervous that I may not like her if I met her in person. I didn't want to push it, but also, what? She was amazing. We vibed together like crazy. Her pictures were gorgeous, and everything about her was absolute perfection. Almost too perfect. This is when the idea of, am I being catfished, came to mind. I did a bit of fishing myself, asking if there was a reason that she didn't want to meet. I didn't want to be pushy, but I also wanted to know if this was a waste of time. I thought that maybe it was just worth asking, is there a reason you don't want to meet with me? She got a bit defensive, but then asked if she could call me. I immediately agreed, and when she called, I could tell that she had been crying. I immediately felt horrible about trying to push her, and I immediately apologized to her, saying that I shouldn't have been so aggressive about it. She then told me that the reason she was so nervous about meeting was that she was scared of how perfect things were going, and she said she didn't want to move too fast. She followed that up by explaining to me how she had just come out of a really bad relationship where the other person was emotionally abusive, and she didn't want to end up in that same cycle. We talked a bit about relationships, and I told her about my ex and how she was, and it felt like we connected even more. I then told her that I really liked her, and that I would be more than happy to just keep this over the phone and in text for as long as she needed, and whenever she was ready, we could get together and get coffee. Much to my surprise, the next morning, I got a text from Bella saying, "You've convinced me, let's meet up at 10 at," and then mentioned a local coffee shop that I was definitely familiar with. It was a quaint little place that was a favorite hangout spot for my friends and I, so it was perfect. Feeling a mix of nervous excitement and anticipation, I arrived at the coffee shop, and I thought that this was going to be the start of something amazing. I sat at my favorite table for a few minutes, and then about half an hour. Then an hour. I was actually quite upset thinking that she had ghosted me, until I heard a voice call my name. I turned around to greet Bella, but was immediately struck with a gut-wrenching feeling. Standing there was my ex, Christy. The only thing different was that she dyed her hair and was wearing blue contacts. I kind of said, "Oh, hi, Christy," not really certain if what was happening, and she chuckled, saying, "Christy? No, my name is Bella, silly." This sent chills down my spine. Now, you could ask how I didn't recognize my ex in the pictures on the dating app, but I will also say that the woman in those pictures was not Christy. They were someone else altogether. You could ask how I didn't recognize her voice, but I'll say that Christy had a very generic mid-20s Midwestern girl voice, so it didn't even cross my mind. I felt a wave of anger, betrayal, and disappointment hit me, but I won't say that I was surprised. Manipulation was Christy's specialty, and she had certainly manipulated me. I asked her what she was doing there, and she kept trying to pretend that she was Bella, and not Christy. It was honestly sickening the way she kept saying, "My name is Bella, not Christy." As if I was going to fall for it. As if I would just say, "Oh, you're right, and you're totally not my abusive B-word of an ex that made me feel like garbage. How could I ever be so silly?" I pulled up Bella's account and one of her pictures, and I kind of pointed it at her, like, "That's not you, Christy." She then mentioned that it was just an older photo. No matter what I said, she would come back with something to try and convince me that she was this other person. I stood up and said that I was done with that she was a psycho, and that I wanted nothing to do with her. I asked her how she could do something so damn deceitful like this. How could she do this and think that it was okay? That I would just be okay with it? She then started off by trying to justify her actions, saying that she did it because she still loved me, and that now she knew I was into redheads. As if that was the reason that we broke up. Because I like redheads. As I kept laughing and shaking my head at her statement, her demeanor shifted. She moved from explaining herself to screaming at me about how I belonged to her and no one else. The entire coffee shop went silent. The manager walked over to our table, trying to calm her down, but she was beyond reasoning. She lashed out, attacked him, jumping on him and hitting him repeatedly. And some of the other baristas jumped in to grab her and pulled her off the manager and restrained her until the cops arrived. They took her, took statements, asked me some questions about her, and after all was said and done, I was just left there shaken and shocked. I went home, deleted my profile on the dating app, and decided that I was just going to take a break from dating altogether. I've decided that while online dating may be simple and efficient, it's not worth the risk of potentially getting catfished by Christy again. I've been playing this MMO for a few years now, and I've definitely created some relationships along the way. In fact, a few of my closest friends I met through the game. So, when I started talking to this guy named Zeke on a dating app, and he said he had instantly matched with me because I listed I was a big fan of the game, I was pretty excited. Not only did I find someone interesting, but I also found someone that played the same games as me, which was a big help. No fighting over what activities we would do in our free time, right? But, thankfully, we didn't just have the game in common. We actually seemed to have very similar personalities. And it wasn't even me saying, I like or dislike this and him agreeing. He brought up a lot of things first, and I agreed with it. It was actually a breath of fresh air to find someone that was so much like me, in a way. We shared pictures back and forth and even started texting outside of the site, as well as, of course, playing the game together. And that was the only time that we ever really talked, though, was in the game. We talked a few times on the phone, but it was usually short. I think it may have been nerves, but it was also cute, so I could deal with it. Still, it was nothing weird to me. He was always quick to respond and never suspicious. That was until I tried to plan something for us to do outside of the game. I was ready to meet him and go on an official date. And when I suggested this, he was just as excited. However, our date got canceled by him, due to something coming up. He said it was a family thing, so while I was bummed, I understood, and we just planned to reschedule. This happened a few times, and to be honest, I was starting to get pretty annoyed. I really liked him, but I was starting to think that he either wasn't actually interested in me, or I really did tell myself that maybe I was being catfished. I dismissed the latter, though, because he would have gotten nothing out of it other than a new buddy in a video game, so what would be the point? So, I confronted him. I told him to be honest, and if he wasn't interested in dating, then I would move on, and I guess we could just be friends. He apologized and said that that wasn't the case, and that even more so, he had strong feelings for me, but he was worried that I wouldn't like him if we met in person. He was worried that it wouldn't be the same. I told him that was ridiculous, because unless his pictures weren't real and his whole personality was a lie, I would still be interested in him. And even more so, knowing that there was a real person behind the phone or computer screen. So, finally, we made real plans, and he gave me a sincere promise that we would get together. I told him he better keep his promise because I was going to look my best that night and give us one more chance. So, there I was, the night of our date, waiting at the bar of a restaurant for him to get there. He texted me 5 minutes till our meetup time, and said that he was still going to be there, but that he was running late. So, I grabbed a drink and waited. And waited. I was pretty annoyed, and I expected him to, again, cancel on me, and I was prepared to just be overall done with him, too. But, while I was waiting, I heard my name and looked around to see someone that I actually recognized. It was a guy that worked in the same building as me, but was in a different department. For the sake of this, we'll call him Brett. I was an admin assistant, and he worked in our on-site tech support department. His department would help anyone in the office with hardware and software issues, replace systems, etc. I saw him a few times when our VP had to get a new system. He helped to get it set up, and I had to actually let him in the office. He even helped me with some new software that I had installed. Other than those specific instances, I may have seen him in passing, or in our cafeteria, but that was about it. But we did recognize each other, obviously, and he approached me to say hello. He even complimented me on my outfit and apologized if he interrupted something. I assured him that he didn't, saying that I thought my date had canceled on me, so he offered to buy me a drink and I agreed. He sat with me for a bit, as I checked my phone on occasion, wondering if he was going to show up, but I never even got another call nor text from him. So, instead, I ordered myself some food and just talked with Brett. It was strange because I started to notice things that we had in common, just like Zeke and I. Then, I started to notice his cadence and mannerisms were the same. I figured out what was happening. I grabbed my phone and sent one final message to Zeke, and then watched as Brett's phone lit up. He quickly grabbed it and acted as if it was something unrelated, which, I suppose, without seeing the message, I couldn't say for sure, but it was pretty damn suspicious. I tried to get him to slip up by asking certain questions, or talking about certain topics, and I finally succeeded. I brought up games, and I got him to bring up the MMO, as I acted like it would make me look weird. Then he brought up a very specific strategy that I had mentioned to Zeke in texts that I liked to use. Not many people know how I do it because I don't just start talking about that randomly. So, I caught him, and confronted him. He said that he didn't know how to talk to me or ask me out, so he created a fake profile. But all the pictures he used were of his roommate. Like I mentioned, I hardly knew him, but I didn't dislike him or have any problems with him. I never even got weird or awkward vibes from him. Not even that night. At least up until I started piecing things together. So, he apologized for misleading me, but then also confessed that he was in love with me, especially since getting to know me more. He thought it would be romantic to admit how he did this, too. He said that he basically studied me. He watched what I ate to see what I liked. He watched my Facebook and Insta pages to learn more about me, and even my family. He even said he learned more about my hobbies, such as the game, so that we would have more in common. He explained how he would constantly hop servers over and over until he found the one I was in, and just listened to me and my friends talk. I was honest with him, and I told him that what he was doing was not sweet. It wasn't impressive. It was creepy and unhealthy. I told him that he should have just been a man and approached me, and that this could have gone so much differently. I could tell that I had crushed him, and for a moment I felt bad. But then I realized that he actually did take something from me. He took the opportunity to start conversations with him, to actually get to know each other, agree with each other, relate to one another. Because he already knew so much about me, and I hardly knew him. In fact, I felt powerless, and like I had become some kind of human study. So, I told him to just leave me alone, and I left. He, of course, persisted though, wanting me to give him another chance, but he didn't learn. I blocked his number since he unfortunately had mine, but he started messaging me from a different number. So, I eventually had to just change my number. He tried adding me on social media, and when that didn't work, he thought making a fake account would, and sent a message request. Now, since this all stemmed outside of work, I didn't report it at the time. But then, I got some kind of lockout on my computer, and it said that I had to call IT. And he just so happens to take the call and knew how to fix it, but said that he had to be at the computer. I was livid. So, I went to my boss and I explained everything. They were quick to take action too, which I appreciated. He was given the choice of being laid off, or he would be moved to a different site across town. I assumed that he took the latter because his name was still in the directory. I didn't want to be the reason someone lost their job, but if he would have just dropped it, I wouldn't have reported it to my work. The messages, requests, and calls all stopped soon after, so I assumed that he moved on to a new obsession. Sorry to whoever that is. But I learned my lesson. Get more proof that someone is who they say they are, and if that happens to be a first date, and I get stood up the first time, there are no more second chances. Now, I just have to watch out for creepy coworkers, I guess. So, that, my friends, was a collection of some true scary catfish stories. Catfishing is one of those terms that's an interesting one. To be catfished, if you don't know, which I'm assuming by now you probably do, is to wind up in a position of essentially dating. For the most part, it's dating with somebody only to find that person is not who they claim they are, as all these stories definitely highlight. And to me, it's just a very interesting concept. Do you not think you're going to get caught? Sorry, do they not think they're going to get caught more so? Do they not think the person they're quote-unquote dating is going to realize who they are at some point? Like, you can't keep up the charade forever. Charades don't last. The truth will happen eventually. So, I don't know, weird stuff. Obviously, I can say I've never been catfished. I've been in the same relationship with the same person for, and I'm saying this because it's important, as of today, June 10th, 2023, yep, it's our anniversary, we have been together for 16 years. Take into consideration the fact that I'm 32, she's 31, and you'll realize that's half my life. I have officially been with patients for half of my life, and that's just crazy to me. So, not that we're together, that she's dealt with me on a daily basis for 16 years of her life. How the hell can anyone put up with me for 16 years? That's something like, what, 5,800 days? 5,800 days she's put up with me? Wow. What is wrong with her? No, I'm kidding. She knows I love her. We're very happy. And she's very supportive, so. Anyways. My friends, I hope you all enjoyed this collection of stories. If you did, please hit that thumbs up button. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, consider subscribing. You can also leave me a comment down below letting me know your thoughts. join Patreon or channel members for early access and extra goodies and stuff like that. And if you have a story you would like to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so. You may notice there was no intro to this video. I'm trying something new, trying to up my average view duration. My AVD is pretty good, but I want to see if not having an intro actually helps with some videos, so probably won't be a permanent fix unless it does, like, amazing things, but we're going to see if it does something, so. All that said, friends, I hope you're having a beautiful weekend. I hope that I do see you very, very soon. And until then, remember, you are loved. You are valid. You are important. You're the best you that you can be. Never let anyone tell you otherwise, and please don't forget it. And until next time, much love, and sleep well.